Welcome back to the deep dive. Today is going to be a little different. Usually we are looking at tech trends or business strategies or, some new scientific breakthrough.
Right.
But today we are looking at a PDF that claims to be, well, a map of reality itself.
It is certainly the most ambitious document we have had on the desk in a long time. It is titled To Our Social Power. But yeah, that title feels almost modest compared to what is inside.
Right. I opened this thing expecting, I don't know, a manifesto or some political tract. And instead I found geometry. I found timelines that look like arrows, clocks that are sliced into pieces, and references to everything from Bertrand Russell to the phases of Venus.
Yeah.
It felt less like a book and more like a schematic.
That is a great way to put it. A schematic for a machine that the author claims we are all stuck inside.
Okay.
The central premise here is that society, our entire social reality, is trapped in a loop, a false loop, or what the source calls social hypnosis.
And usually when you hear social hypnosis, you think of media manipulation or propaganda. Don't believe the news.
Sure, the obvious stuff.
But this document goes way deeper. It argues that the hypnosis is structural. It's in how we process time and truth. The claim is that we use belief as a way to avoid looking at the actual mechanics of reality.
It is a bold stance. The author is essentially saying, stop listening to the stories people tell and look at the math. Look at the geometry.
And if the key fits the lock,
the door opens. If you have to believe the door is open, you are still locked inside.
So our mission today is to see if we can find that key. We're going to unpack this concept of the line versus the circle.
And we have to figure out why on earth there is a red clock and a blue clock, and why the blue one is the only one that supposedly matters.
And we are going to look at why this document thinks Richard Dawkins, of all people, is missing the point of religion entirely.
And a quick heads up for you listening. We're going to be discussing some theological terms, Jesus, Revelation, Genesis. But the source material treats these strictly as structural markers, almost like variables in an equation.
So that's how we're going to approach it.
Exactly, as logic, not dogma.
Okay, so let's start with the first big visualization that hits you in the document is labeled the structure of the line. It is deceptively simple. It is just an arrow with 3 dots on it.
Right. You have Genesis at the start, Jesus in the middle, and Revelation at the end.
Now, for most people, those are, religious chapters, but the text labels them as parts of a logical problem.
Yeah, that's the key.
Genesis is the dilemma is set. Jesus is the dilemma is crystallized, and Revelation is the dilemma is solved.
Okay.
What does it even mean to crystallize a dilemma?
Well, think of it like a murder mystery or a complex puzzle. In the beginning, Genesis, the crime is committed or the puzzle is introduced. The dilemma is set.
Okay.
But usually the clues are messy. You don't really know what the core problem is yet.
You're just collecting information.
Exactly. Crystallization is that moment the problem becomes perfectly clear. You see the mechanism of the trap.
So in this framework, the Jesus point on the timeline isn't just a historical event. It is the moment the human condition was clearly defined.
Precisely. The source argues that before you can solve a problem, you have to define it perfectly. The Jesus point is that definition.
And Revelation isn't the end of the world.
It is the solution. It is the answer key. The author insists this is a structural necessity. You cannot have a solution without a setup.
Okay, but here's where the text gets combative. It argues that society refuses to walk this line. Instead, we use what the author calls an escape hatch.
This is one of the most critical insights in the document. The escape hatch is the phrase, it is based on belief.
I use that phrase. We all do. You have your truth, I have mine. It is a matter of faith.
Of course.
It is polite. It keeps the peace.
It keeps the peace, but the source argues it destroys reality. The text calls this manipulation, distortion, and social hypnosis.
So the argument is that if something is actually real, if it is structurally sound, you don't need to believe in it.
You just verify it.
It says here, everything before that point is manipulation. None of it is real. That is incredibly binary.
It is.
It is saying that the moment you retreat to, it is just my belief,
Yeah.
you have admitted that your argument doesn't actually work.
It is the difference between engineering and storytelling. You don't believe a bridge will hold your car.
No, you calculate the load.
Exactly. If the bridge collapses, your belief doesn't matter. The source says society is building bridges out of belief and then wondering why we're confused when they collapse.
This brings us to the visual core of the theory. The clocks. This is where I really had to pause and stare at the diagrams for a minute. We have a red circle and a blue circle.
The tale of two clocks.
Let's break them down. The red circle has numbers 1 through 11, but it is an open loop. It is broken. So the source calls it the blind circle.
And this represents our current social reality. We go through the motions, 1, 2, 3, up to 11, but we never close the loop. We never reach 12.
So there's always a gap.
Always a gap where belief has to step in to explain why things don't add up.
And then there is the blue circle.
The blue circle is closed. It goes 1 through 12. It connects back to the start perfectly. The source calls this verifiable reality.
There is this phrase that appears over and over again in the text, almost like a chant. When blue 11 shuts. It sounds like code. What is blue 11 and why does it need to shut?
So imagine a vault door with multiple locking bolts. Blue 11 shuts represents the final logical tumbler clicking into place.
Oh.
It is the moment an argument becomes unassailable. When the circle closes, there is no gap left. No room for interpretation, no room for belief.
The text uses the math example here. It says you can manipulate society into believing 2 + 2 = 5, or that 2 + 2 is a matter of opinion.
Right, you can create a social consensus around it.
But structurally,
The door shuts at 4. That is the blue circle. It doesn't care about your opinion.
so the source is saying that we are living in the red circle, the blind circle, where we just keep spinning the wheels using belief to patch over the fact that our math is wrong.
We are cheating reality. That's the term it uses.
It even brings in Bertrand Russell to back this up. I have not thought about Russell since college philosophy class.
Well, he's the heavyweight champion of logic here. In 1903, he famously said, "Only verifiable statements are meaningful."
And the source clings to this.
It is saying, look, I'm playing by Russell's rules.
The argument being that the blue clock, this structural timeline of Genesis to Revelation, actually passes Russell's test.
Yes. The author claims that if this structure wasn't verifiable, a logician like Russell would have found the gap. He would have found the escape hatch.
But the source claims blue shuts.
The logic holds tight.
So if the logic holds, why doesn't everyone see it? Why are we still in the red circle?
Because the red circle is comfortable. The red circle allows you to be right without doing the work. The text asks a scathing question. Why is everyone okay with cheating? It views this reliance on non-verifiable belief as a fundamental dishonesty. It calls it the lying wheels of time.
That is a heavy accusation.
Yeah.
It basically says we're all complicit in a lie because the truth is too rigid for us.
Imagination has no limitation. Reality has limitations. That is the quote. In the red circle, you can imagine whatever you want. In the blue circle, you have to submit to the structure.
Okay, let's apply this to a real-world example because the text does. And it picks a fight with two very famous people, Joe Rogan and Richard Dawkins.
This is a fascinating case study because it shows exactly what the author means by missing the line.
So the scenario is Rogan interviewing Dawkins. Rogan asks him, did Jesus exist?
Yeah.
A simple historical question.
And Dawkins gives the standard atheist answer. He basically shrugs and says, who cares? His point is, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in miracles. So whether there was a guy named Jesus or not is irrelevant to my worldview.
To me, that always seems like a fairly logical position for an atheist.
It does on the surface.
But the source material absolutely rips this apart. It calls it a miss, the blind leading the blind. Why is the author so angry at Dawkins here?
Because Dawkins is confusing the magic with the mechanic.
The magic with the mechanic?
The source argues that Dawkins is so obsessed with denying the belief part, the miracles, the divinity, that he refuses to look at the structural part.
So he is ignoring the data point because he doesn't like the story attached to it.
Precisely. The text distinguishes between Jesus, the historical marker, and Christ, the structural function on that timeline we talked about. The quote is, they can all see Jesus, it is Christ they cannot see.
Meaning they can admit a guy lived, but they cannot see that his life was the crystallization point of the dilemma.
Exactly. By saying who cares? Dawkins is refusing to look through the telescope. He is refusing to analyze the structure of history because he is so afraid it might look like religion.
The text compares this to Galileo.
It is a great analogy. When Galileo said, the Earth goes around the sun, the church officials didn't say, let me check your math.
No, they just refused to look through his telescope.
Right. They said the telescope was creating optical illusions. They didn't want to see the data because it broke their worldview.
And the source says Dawkins is doing the exact same thing. He is the church official now.
Yes. The author is pointing to the line, this lock and key solution, and saying, look, and society is saying, who cares? Or That is just your belief.
So who cares? It's a defense mechanism.
It is part of the hypnosis. It keeps the red circle spinning.
This leads us to the most psychological part of the text, because let's be honest, if someone comes to you with a PDF and says, I have the key to reality and everyone else is hypnotized, your first instinct is, okay, this person is delusional.
And the source anticipates that. It tackles the concept of delusion head on.
Okay.
And it offers a rebuttal that I actually found to be the strongest logical argument in the whole document. It is the Napoleon argument.
I love this part. It is surprisingly grounded.
So the definition of a delusion is usually a false belief about oneself or reality. I can sit here and tell you, I am Napoleon. That is an identity delusion.
Sure. You can believe that, but it doesn't make it true.
But the source argues a delusional person cannot correctly place themselves in a structural position that only exists if the whole narrative is true.
That is a bit abstract. Break that down for us.
Okay, let's use the astronomy analogy from the text. The phases of Venus.
Right, back to Galileo.
If you believe the Earth is the center of the universe, the geocentric view, you can create a very complex model to explain how the stars move. You can believe it really hard. But there is one thing that model cannot explain. The shadows on Venus, the phases, they don't make sense if the Earth is in the middle.
The geometry is wrong.
The geometry is wrong. But if you shift to the heliocentric view sun in the center, suddenly, the phases of Venus are predicted perfectly. The lock fits the key.
So the heliocentric view solves the puzzle.
Exactly. Now, applying this to the author. The argument is that a delusional person can invent a character, but they cannot invent a heliocentric model of history that solves the dilemma of Genesis and Revelation perfectly.
Because delusion is chaotic.
It doesn't build working keys.
So the author is saying, if I were crazy, the math wouldn't work. But the math works.
Delusion cannot solve structural placement in reality. That is the core defense. You can call the author crazy, but you have to explain why the blue 11 key turns the lock.
But this isn't just an academic exercise for the author. The text gets very personal here.
Very.
The author identifies themselves directly with this structural solution, using terms like the writer and connecting themselves to the concept of Christ.
And this is where the cost of the blue circle becomes apparent. The source describes a binary choice that society referred to as the beast forces on anyone who challenges the social hypnosis.
It calls it the atheist land scenario.
Yes. The text says, if I claim to be this structural solution, society only offers 2 boxes to put me in.
Okay.
Box A, you are a liar. You are an abusive psychopath playing a game for power. Box B, you are mentally ill. You are psychotic.
It is a trap. The text says, which of these 2 glorious personas should I show up as?
Yeah.
It is sarcastic, but you can feel the frustration.
It is the ultimate isolation. Because if society refuses to look at the third option, that the structure is real, then the messenger has to be destroyed.
They have to be categorized as something broken.
Exactly.
The text mentions being isolated, where no one believes a single word I say. It talks about silence.
That silence is powerful. The source calls silence the voice of distortion. It is the sound of the red circle ignoring the glitch. The author writes, you cannot put me in house arrest for saying it is my name, but you can make sure I am isolated.
It is a chilling thought.
Yeah.
We think of censorship as people shouting you down. But this is censorship by ignoring. It is the who cares response again.
Yeah. And the source argues that this silence is actually proof of the distortion. It says that the total absence of recognition, the fact that the world ignores the structural solution, is the world record of social hypnosis. It proves how deep the spell is.
Because if the red circle acknowledged the blue circle...
the red circle would have to stop spinning.
Exactly.
If you admit the door is shut, you cannot keep pretending to look for the exit.
So if we zoom out,
Yeah.
we have these timelines, these clocks, this plea to look at the structure of reality versus the stories we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
What is the listener supposed to do with this? I mean, we are not all going to be geometric theologians.
No, of course not. I think the takeaway is about auditing our own relationship with truth. The source is presenting a very sharp tool. It is asking us, when you are faced with a contradiction, do you try to solve it structurally? Or do you use the belief escape hatch?
Do we say, let's check the math? Or do we say, well, that is just your opinion?
Right. The source warns us that social hypnosis is real. It suggests that this escape hatch isn't a freedom, it is a prison. It keeps us in the loop where problems never get solved, they just get believed away.
It challenges the definition of freedom. We usually think freedom means I can believe whatever I want.
But the text says, Imagination has no limitation. Reality has limitations. Maybe real freedom, or at least real sanity, is accepting the limitations.
Shut means shut.
Shut means shut. You can believe the door is open, but if it is locked, you aren't going anywhere.
It is a concept that lingers. It forces you to look at the news or your own arguments and ask, am I looking at a red clock or a blue clock? Am I cheating and nice of?
And if you find yourself saying, who cares? Maybe that is the moment you should care the most.
I want to leave everyone with a final thought, based on that haunting idea of silence in the text. The source claims that silence is the voice of distortion. We often think of the truth as something that makes a loud noise, a revelation, a shout. But this document suggests that the truth is just a quiet, clicking sound. The sound of a key fitting a lock.
And if we're too busy shouting our beliefs, we might miss that click entirely.
Are we using our unlimited imagination just to avoid the limited truth? That is something to mull over. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We will catch you next time.
See you then.